So the Egri Bikaver, which means bull's blood from Eger, it was famously exported, okay, during the communist times, and it was basically cheap. So this did not do a lot of good for the reputation of Hungarian wine, even though, again, Tokaj Asu always remained famous as a dessert wine. It's still, dessert wines were not widely purchased, but the dry wine, the Egri Bikaver, was the most exported famous red wine from Hungary. Now, this didn't do a lot of good for the reputation of Hungarian wine. The bull's blood is basically a cuvée. It's a blend of several grape varieties, but luckily, Hungary has now put that aside in terms of what it wants to show the world. And now in Eger, you have some very, very top winemakers who are producing premium versions of Egri Bikaver. It is still made, but not only do you have Egri Bikaver, which requires about 6 months in oak, you also now have Egri Bikaver Superior, which requires 12 months in oak, and Egri Bikaver Grand Superior, which is 16 months in oak. Now, this is very nice because the focus here, as you can hear, is quality, high quality. And there is a minimum of 3 grapes required to make a Bikaver now. And of course, it should be dominated by the main red grape, Kek-Frankos. Now, what's very interesting is that bull's blood actually originated in Sexard, not in Eger. And so you had, back in the 19th century, you had Sexardi Bikaver. And now, today, they are making their quality versions. They're giving a nod to history, but it's, again, the focus is on quality. So in Sexart, the Bikaver there requires 4 grape varieties, especially Kek-Frankos. That's the main grape. But it has to also include Kadarka, 5%. Now, interestingly enough, over 100 years ago, and back in the 19th century, Kadarka was the main red grape of Hungary. Whereas today it's Kek-Frankos, before it was Kadarka. And Kadarka, there's not a lot of it planted anymore, but they're bringing it back. And it is an important, even though just 5% is required, it is a necessary component of the Sexardi Bikaver. And there is a lot of maturity and, of course, different months that are involved in the levels of the Bikaver, Sexardi Bikaver Premium or the regular. They all require a certain amount of aging in oak, amount of time. Now I'm going to mention some producers' names I think that are important to look out for. Of the Egri Bikaver, okay, you have the wineries Sant Andrea, Tumara, Kovac Nimrod. Those are just a few. And especially, there's a top vineyard site there called Nagy Eged Hedge. Okay, and this is a fantastic terroir going up 500 meters above sea level, very minerally, and good clay, good rock, and some areas even have sand. It's fantastic. And in Sexard, which goes back down again to the southwest, you have the producers of Takler, Haiman, Duji Tamash. These are a few just to mention. There are many, many more. And I encourage you to do a little research online under Eger, E-G-E-R, and Sexard, S-Z-E-K-S-Z-A-R-D. Okay. Now, another very important region, in fact, some say this is the most important region for red wines in Hungary, called Villány. and that is spelled Villany, pronounced Villagne. And there you have the robust international grape varieties. Okay, you have Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot. Now, this started to gain real fame back in the early 1990s, okay, again, after the Iron Curtain fell and investment started to come into Hungary. There was a producer, well, there are a few producers, but one producer, Atelier, his winery and vineyards in Vilan got an investor from Hungary, okay, and that is Franz Weininger. He came over from Burgenland, okay, not too far away. He invested into Atelier's winery and vineyards, and there the quality really started. And Atelier started producing some fantastic full-bodied Cabernet Sauvignons or Bordeaux blends, okay, the Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and really impressive, I have to tell you, really impressive full-bodied wines really started coming out of there, not only from Atelier. In addition to him, you had Joseph Bock, Edith Tiefan, a few others like Malatinsky, Willian, Gaborkish, Schauska, Heumann, really, really fascinating producers. And great terroir, okay? Now, this is an area which is just 5 kilometers from the border of Croatia. Okay, you have a lot of heat. And there's a lot of influence from the Pannonian air. Okay, you have the Pannonian plain where there's a lot of heat in the summer. Okay, and that comes through, that wafts over, not only to Milan, but it wafts over into Austria as well. And you have certain special terroirs in Milan, the Kopar or Jammertal. These are hilly areas, extinct volcano, and really, really making just beautiful wines since. There was, 20 years ago, there was a strong emphasis on oak aging. So a lot of these wines, which were extremely age-worthy and still are, the oak was quite pronounced. Now there's more of a tempered use of oak now, so you're getting more of the fruit, but you have the high alcohol, but very well integrated alcohol, and the balance of the oak, the body, the fruit, and the alcohol acidity, all in harmony, absolutely perfect. Interestingly enough, I would say over the past decade, there's been more of a focus that has gone from the Cabernet Sauvignon to Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc, it's making some wonderful examples there in Vilan, and I would encourage you to sample some when you can, the Cabernet Franc from Vilan. Now, there are other key wine regions. I mentioned Lake Balaton. Lake Balaton, this very, very shallow steppe lake, is basically in the western part of the country. And you have lovely white wines there, okay? Particularly, as I mentioned before, the northern side of Balaton, there are extinct volcanoes and the beautiful basalt soils, which are perfect for the grape I mentioned, Olas Riesling, okay? Welsh Riesling, as I said, in Austria, but it's called Olas Riesling there. And there's also another grape, Kekniele, which means blue stalk. Beautiful mineral versions of these wines are coming from that region, and I'm very impressed with the quality of the producers, particularly on the northern side of Balaton. I mean, you have also other bigger wineries and many other wineries on the other side of the Lake Balaton, where you don't have volcanic soils. But I'm a big fan of the north, say particularly around Badajoz and the surroundings. I'll give you some names. Cognari, Legli, Zeramley, Gilvesi, Giulapalfi, these are good producers that are making some stunning versions. And now Palfi, by the way, a winery on the northern side, he also makes some beautiful Pinot Noir. So there are some nice surprises to be found there too. A great region to explore. Now, I mentioned Szomló before, this little extinct volcano region of 830 hectares, 832 to be exact. It's also volcanic soil, basalt soils, and known for the Ufar grape. Very interestingly, it was the very first region that I had visited in Hungary back in 1992. And at that time, there were all very low volume producers. I mean, most family had their little parcels of vineyards. Okay, many scattered all around the bottom of this extinct volcano. And I was with a very interesting group, headed by a very important wine specialist, Talos Attila. He runs the Bor Társaság Wine Society, very important distributor of wines in Hungary. And with his knowledge, it was so good to be with him because I learned a lot from going on some trips with him. And the first trip was to Szomló. And we visited some amazing producers who were very old back then. And two names I'll mention, Fekete Béla and Imre George Kovács. And I see them as icons of this region and icons in Hungary. Fekete Béla, he eventually, just not a few years ago, sold his vineyards. There was no one to take it over, and then they were eventually sold. Now, he would be in his 90s, but I have to check and see. I'm not sure as of this recording if he's still alive, but he is definitely an icon of Hungarian winemaking. The other producer, Imre George Kovács, also, he is still producing wine, as far as I know. Both of these producers made fantastic dry Ufark wine. And now there are other producers who came in, like Kreinbacher, who makes a beautiful sparkling Furmint. Now, Furmint also grows very nicely in Szomló. And you can imagine if it's growing in Tokaj, which is another region of extinct volcanoes, it's going to grow nicely in Szomló. And indeed it does. The only issue in Szomló is the small volume, because it's a small region. But definitely an area I would say is a must. It's a must-visit region. Another region I mentioned on the border of Hungary and Austria is Sopron. And there you get some lovely Kek-Frankos wine, Kek-Frankos grape varieties. Earlier, if you remember, I had mentioned Franz Weininger and the Austrian producer who invested into the Wieland wine estate of Attila Gere. Well, Franz Weininger's son, Franz Reinhard Weininger, established his winery over the border of Austria into Hungary in Sopron, or Balf. There are vineyards in Balf, to be specific, which is near Sopron. And he is producing some beautiful Kek-Frankos wines and beautiful, natural, spontaneously fermented. It's a biodynamic winery and very, very impressive, high quality production. And he has contributed quite a lot to the Hungarian wine scene. Now, it's important to mention he exports a lot of his wines. So let's say Hungary only gets a portion of his wines, a good deal is exported, but nevertheless, he's made an important contribution to biodynamic winemaking and into lovely versions of Kek-Frankos, particularly from the Sopron region, which is, by the way, right near the Neusiedler See lake. Okay, in Austria, you have Lake Neusiedler See. a part of it is in Hungary, okay, and Franz Reinhard Weniger's vineyards are very close to the Hungarian side of the Lake Neusiedl See.